Before we begin on this video, I have to point out a few little things I did wrong. Well, I installed the regulator backwards, which was making an air leak, which was also affecting how this thing really ran. The arrow for flow is pointing this way. Well, I had everything set up the other way, because the only way to do that and have this gauge facing out is to have it go this way. Because if you have it turned around, the only way to have the gauge in there won't work. Even if you put it sideways, there's not enough room for the fitting. So this all needs to be reversed. I ended up getting a different air regulator, just something cheap from Harbor Freight. Put it in here and it makes a big difference. I also got a inline water filter to help catch all the moisture. To be clear, the machine works really good. The regulator they send with it is not set up the correct way, and I will let them know that. The other thing you should know is I have never run one of these before. They did send this to me, and I've always wanted one to try out. And yes, I have never run one before, so you're dealing with a learner here. Also, these things, I also bought them at Harbor Freight, seem to work quite well. They're about a shade 6, which is about right. You can see a lot better than what I was using for the welding helmet. We're going to do some test cuts here, get into the video, and then it'll be a little bit more cutting at the end. And one last thing, make sure everything's on a different circuit if you're going to be using this on 110 and have your air compressor running, because I ended up blowing fuses out when the air compressor went to kick on while this was running, when they were both running on 110. So I had to run this on 220 just to finish the video out. Before you start doing any of this, you always want to try and have a decent ground. Otherwise, it won't always take off real easy. So what you want to do is set this between 40 and 50 psi for most cuts. Set the switch on, and you have a full range all the way up to 55 amps. If you're running on 110, it'll only stop at 35. In other words, the gauge maxed out, that's all the more it'll give you, which is a nice feature. So we're going to run through some different thicknesses of metal. This is a 2" by 2" tube steel. This is some guard off a deck, mower deck. 2 different sizes of angle iron. This really thick stuff. And then I believe this is 5/8. That should be the maximum. We'll probably be maxed out on that. So let's go ahead and give it a go. We're going to start out with a piece of tube steel here. And now you see why a good ground is so important. We're just going to hook the ground directly onto it. And there she goes. A little bit of curvature going on, but she blew right through it. Let's move up to a piece of angle iron. I have the ground directly onto it. We're still at 30 amps. Again, not perfect, but with a little practice you can definitely get better at it, or you can add a straight line, which is what most people do. For sake of the video, we're going to try this at 30 amps and see if you can cut through it on 110 volt. Actually, I think 35 is the max for 110 on this. I'll have to look that up. I'll post something below there. Was I right? Was I wrong? Let me know. We'll crank it up to 35 and see if we can cut through this. Not really. It's not doing a great job. Let's crank it all the way up. Here we are at 55 amps. Let's see. It did it. I'd go a little slow, but she got there. I was not holding perfectly down either. I was at an angle. But she'll do it. So far we've done, this here's an 1/8, this here's 3/8, and this here's a 1/2 inch. We'll see how it does on 1/2 inch. We're again full 55, full bore all the way. Let's do it. I'm not going to take much off of this, probably just the outer line here, because I may need this in the future. You never know. No. Didn't really do it. It tried. Let me crank the air up just a little bit. Crank the air pressure up some. Let's see if that helped it any. Why it looks like I'm still at an angle. Maybe I just am. Can't help feel like I think 1/2 inch is going to be its max. So it will do a 1/2 inch. Might take a couple passes, but she'll do it. Since I'm at full bore at the minute, let's just see how quick I can blow through all this stuff. That went through pretty quick. Yeah, this here is not working here as well. Yeah, this ain't doing so hot. I was going more for speed than accuracy. I didn't have myself braced either. Before I kind of had my arm braced up against here. Like that first cut turned out okay. But that's why I drug this thing over, trying to get a little straighter cut on it. I think I did better the second time. It was less angled, but it took a little longer to do it. So yeah, full bore, she'll blow through real thin stuff like it's nothing, and it'll get you through some thicker stuff. Sure beats having to drag a torch out all the time. So, I hope you enjoy the rest of the video. I'll be more an unboxing, what all this comes with, and not really on how to set up the air regulator, because that's fairly straightforward, and the one they sent with it didn't quite work. You're just gonna have to supply your own until they get that figured out. So, link below, leave a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Enjoy the rest of the video. Have a great day. Hello everyone, and welcome to Past Preserver. This is something I've been looking forward to for a very long time. I've always wanted a plasma cutter. And this here is an AutoGen. They were nice enough to send me one and a few other things, so keep an eye out for those. Today we have an AutoGen 55 amp, 110 volt, 120 volt. It does come with an adapter. The end of the cord comes out as 110, and there's a big plug. You can hook this into 220. We will try it on both here later in the video, because I happen to have both now. So on the front, we have pretty simple controls. This will take you up to 55 amps. You have an on-off switch, and you have 3 little ports. You have your ground clamp, your cutter with a little air line in the middle, so make sure you don't lose that cap, and then your power for telling it when to turn on and off. Both sides seem to have decent ventilation on them. We'll fire this up in a minute. Coming to the back, we have a hose here that says gas in. Well, it's really air that you're putting into this. You don't want to put gas into it. Here's your ground cable. Here's some extra hose. Inside this little box, you'll get an air regulator, a pressure gauge, a bit of Teflon tape, a barb that I'm not going to use. I'm going to put a quick connect fitting on, and then this here will hook into the air line here as a quick connect. It just slips in and pushes on and stays in place. If you need to remove it, simply pull it towards you and you can slip that off there. Like I say, I'm not going to use this. I'm going to use a quick connect for my air compressor. There is also a bracket here, and this is going to go right up here. There are 2 Phillips head screws.
Now that we have that bracket installed, we can start putting our regulator together.
Now, in order to hook this up to your machine, take this big red nut off. That little tab there will indent with the little hole right here. Like so. Put your big red nut back on. Tighten her down. Hand tight should be good. This shouldn't go anywhere real easy. Then we can take our air line coming from the compressor and just push it in place. And it shouldn't come out of there. And then, like I say, our normal air line from our compressor will just come into here. You have a little moisture filter. When this is under pressure, it'll make a seal here and trap all the water. And when it comes off, it should open up and let the moisture just drain out. So now that we've set up the air regulator, we can start looking at our cables. Here we have the ground cable. Has a little zip tie holding it in place, but you have one end that goes into the machine, and then this will clamp on to whatever piece of metal you're working on, you're wanting to cut.
In order to hook this in the machine, you simply take this little lip here. Can you see that? And there's one on the machine right here. Line those two up and give it a twist. And your ground is installed.
The ground cable is about 6 feet long and has a okay clamp. It's a little thin, but it'll get the job done. The cutting cable is about 12 feet long, has a nice sheath over it to keep it from touching up against anything hot. The head of the unit, I like the grip, has a nice trigger, has a little bit of swivel here to give you some good movement around when you're cutting. Comes with 2 extra consumable electrodes. You will have to buy more of those as they wear out, of course. And there's the air tip. In order to install the cutter, you take the big end and you screw it in here. Make sure it's clear of debris. And then the little wire has a dimple on it. And that goes up. And then you screw that collar on and you're ready to go. So let's go over how to change the tip out. Fairly simple. Unscrew your porcelain end. Just be careful with it. It is porcelain. Take these off. Don't lose this little collar because it comes with the big bit and the small bit, but it doesn't come with this little piece of porcelain. So it doesn't matter which way these go in. They're the same size on both ends. You slide her on in. Put your little piece of porcelain over it. Then put your big tip, which I seem to have lost, right there. Then put your big tip over it. And you can put your porcelain back on. Just thread her back together. If it feels like something's binding, don't force it. You don't want to break anything. At some point, you'll have to order another porcelain tip as well as these electrodes. But for now, this should get us going. Now, let's take a minute and talk about shop safety. This does come with a welding mask and a dark lens for it. And I do recommend using something like this because that puts off a lot of light. You're making plasma right there. It's no different than welding. So in order to install this, you have little hooks that go up. We push it into this groove. You'll see it's indented. And it's a little tricky. Very tricky. As you can see, we're making some progress here. Kind of, sort of. I had this in here once and pulled it out. I think it's supposed to be a one-time deal. And there is your handle. So you can hold this up to your face. Now for the top, you take this and bend it around. And click these little tabs into place. Much like so. And then you have this nice little shield around you. You can take your lens, come from the back, pick up on these little tabs here. Slide it into place. And ta-da, just like that, you're ready to weld or cut. We're just about ready to start. First thing you want to do is hook up your ground clamp. Now this is pretty dirty. It should work through there, but I'm just going to take that and give it a little cleanup. Hook our ground right there. Now we have several different sizes of metal to cut through. Piece of angle iron. This here is pretty thick. I've experimented with it a little bit. I've never ran one of these before, so I need you guys to know that going in. This here is actually a torch cut. So there's kind of torch versus someone that doesn't know what they're doing with a plasma cutter. So now, to be fair, that is a pretty thick piece of metal. Looking at our thickness chart, mostly everything's going to be run between 40-50 psi, unless you get up into something that needs 40-45 amps, then you're 50 to 60, or at full 55 amps, you're 60 to 70. What you always want to do is make sure you're wearing some sort of tinted glass. I'm going to set this all the way down to 9 because it's recommended like 6 to 9 in there on the shade setting. You want to wear gloves. Leather would be preferred, but I don't happen to have leather. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut down a short bit of this so I can clamp it on. We can get nice straight cuts across, because obviously I need to work on that. I'm not very experienced with this, as I've said. There she goes. There's cut number 1, not very good, but it blew right through it. So yeah, that was not a very good cut. It's my first time really doing this though. We're going to clamp this to another piece of metal, and I'm just going to use it as a straight line. It didn't help that I hit a hole there, and that kind of threw me off where I was going. These shades are a little too dark. Number 9's a little dark for this. It was kind of hard to see what I was doing too. So just for fun, we're going to try full bore 220 55 amps on some fairly thin steel. Let's see how well this just cuts through it, and pretty maxed out pressure. Yeah, I definitely went too fast. Almost did it though. Oh yeah. Doesn't necessarily need to be full bore on that. It does let you go a little bit quicker. Here's what that looks like. It did a pretty good job. I got a little sloppy towards the end. It starts off good. I think, oh yeah, I can just push it a little further. Nope. So I got to work on that. A lot of this is me. I've never run one of these again, but the machine seems to do what it's supposed to do. So that being said, might as well give myself a test here and see if I can trace the outline of this. I doubt it. It probably won't look very good. And it doesn't help that I got the camera going either. Let's see what I can do. Honestly, that wasn't too bad. It wasn't great. I got into his beak a little. So what do you guys think of that? Not bad for a first time cut. Could have got a little closer in spots. I missed a little indent here. Got into his beak a bit there, but sadly that won't come out. It's attached to the base, all the baffles and stuff in there. Want to thank AutoGen for shipping this out for me to give it a test. I am really liking it. Went ahead and chipped some of the slag off. She does a really nice job. And a lot of this is user error, of course. Because I, like I said multiple times in this video, have never run one before, obviously. But she works. It will work on 110. It'll do probably, yeah, I'd go up to this thickness here. That's about as thick as I'd go on 110 because you're pushing it. And you're getting any thicker, and you definitely want to be 220 running their full bore out. But this real thin stuff, it'll cut through. So if you're doing body work, panels, stuff like that, and just want to, it'll definitely do that on 110. But make sure you run your air compressor and this thing on separate circuits, because if you're running this and it demands the air compressor, you might blow your fuses like we just did earlier. So if you have a 220 setup, go ahead and just run this thing on 220 if you can, and run your air compressor on 110. That's probably the best way to do it. So that's going to do it for this video, and you'll see more of this in the future. If you have any questions, let me know. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, hit subscribe, and have yourself a great day.